Bihar Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dadi Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dadi Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamuna Tira Chadi Jamuna Tira Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivijagacharya Astatarasatasi Stimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaura Premanandi. I'm just going to put it in my lap. I'm going to put the laptop in my lap. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Look at this, she's wearing a mask. You got a special one too. Okay.
He had an altar for her Gurumara. It used to be there. I think they moved. He had an altar with Krishna.
It's over here.
She had her own model.
Her own altar. She made her own. Okay. Very creative. Okay, so we're continuing part 2. It's kind of being called, or is being called, the flow. Instead of saying like an overview or summary, it's another word is a flow of. Yesterday was the Bhagavatam overall, at least cantos 1 through 6. And then we're now going to Canto 1. And as you can see on the screen here, because this is just a flow, it's not details and details, so it's just catching one of the waves that's in the first canto, and one of the waves in the first canto is there's some very significant first-time meetings of persons. Great sage and those meeting the great sage. It happens again. It happens at least a dozen times. So we're going to be discussing 3 of them, but just kind of a flow picture is there are cultural ways by which when one comes in contact with a very elevated person, one etiquette-wise is to receive that person. And there are characteristics, how to identify a sadhu, how to receive a sadhu, how to inquire from a sadhu, how to hear from a sadhu, and how to carry out the understandings that a sadhu is giving. And it happens at least a dozen times. In one sense, it's cultural. People knowing how to give proper respect to a respect-worthy person. But also, it's teaching how one's heart can best open so that one can receive. It's not a formality, it's a devotional experience. And as one learns that art and lives by that art, by hearing it again and again and then living by it, it helps to receive the holy association of Srimad Bhagavatam. And we receive the holy association of Srimad Bhagavatam from a person Bhagavat. I was thinking as we were singing the Jai Radha Madhava song. Come on in. We have a seat over here because we're going to be looking at the screen on this side. Nashta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya. Bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati. Bhakti manifests bhaktir bhavati naishtuki as an irrevocable fact. Nishtha, the stage of nishtha, is the result of having impurities of the heart removed. And as impurities of the heart are removed, then it leaves purity. And the obstacle for purity is our impurities, so that there's a means to remove impurity, and that's seva to the person Bhagavat and the book Bhagavat. The book Bhagavat is hearing it, as you're doing in your Bhagavatam reading groups. The other part is the mood with which you hear Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, and it's the mood of service is enhanced by the person Bhagavat, the person who recites the Bhagavatam and lives by the Bhagavatam, the person Bhagavat. There's two, Bhagavan and Bhagavata. Bhagavata means in relation to Bhagavan. So the book is Bhagavata, and the person who lives by the book is Bhagavata. So Bhagavata Sevaya. So how to recognize a sadhu and how to receive a sadhu and how to render service to the sadhu, it's very important to receive the message of the book Bhagavata. That's the idea. So here we go. Canto 1, the monumental meetings, at least 3 of them out of the 12. And the first one that is the opening scene of the Bhagavatam is, as you see, there's Sutta Goswami, and then there's a whole assembly. He doesn't have a loudspeaker system. He's got a really good voice. And seated in the front row with this distinguishing white beard, that's a very elder Shaunaka Rishi. And Shaunaka is speaking on behalf of that crowd of other sages behind him. As you see, there's a fire yagya in between. The idea was they're in Naimisharanya. Have any of you been to Naimisharanya? It's a nice place. It's near Lucknow. When we went on the Ayodhya Yatra, we went to Naimisharanya. Really nice place. Very, very, very simple, very serene. Where this was spoken. So they were planning to have a yagya, a 1,000-year yagya, meaning you end one yagya, start the next one after the next one ends, and so forth. So instead, they wanted to hear from Sutta, because Sutta had heard Srimad Bhagavatam from Shukadev Goswami, and they wanted to hear it from him. So they offer their respects, and they glorify and recognize his credential, his spiritual quality. and then he offers various prayers to exalted, elevated personality, so he can be qualified to speak properly. These are standard prayers for at the beginning of reciting the Bhagavatam. Then they ask their questions. Shaunaka, again, is the one representing the sages that's asking the questions. And it begins like this. O Sutta Goswami, you are the most fortunate and respected of all those who can speak and recite. Please relate the pious message of Srimad Bhagavatam, which was spoken by the great and powerful sage Shukadev Goswami. He not only heard, but he understood. Not only understood, but he internalized and realized the message. So he's the right person to hear from. In what period and at what place was this first begun? That's the compiling of the Bhagavatam. And why was it taken up? From where did Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, the great sage, get the inspiration to compile this literature? So at the end of yesterday evening, we summarized the first 3 chapters. So this is starting with chapter 4, logically. The 6 questions, 6 answers we summarized. That's the first 3 chapters. Now with 4 comes the questions. They want to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. They want to understand from Sutta what was the inspiration behind compiling this literature, and at what time, what's everything's time, place, circumstance surrounding the Srimad Bhagavatam manifesting in this world. It's kind of like asking, how did Radharani appear? Or how did Hanuman appear? Or how did Krishna appear? Or how did Ram appear? Or how did Srimad Bhagavatam appear? It's a standard and natural question. So, to simplify the process, Vyasadeva divided the one Veda into 4 in order to expand them among men. The 4 divisions of the Vedas were made separately. But the historical facts and authentic stories mentioned in the Puranas are called the 5th Veda. So it mentions Vyasadeva being Trikalagya. He looked into the future. He saw Kali Yuga. He saw how horrible it would be, and he wanted to do something about it. And so it was his inspiration, because that was the question, to take the Vedas that were in the oral tradition, put them in writing, because people in Kali Yuga have bad memories. Prabhupada, very simple statement. If you want to remember something, write it down. That's what Vyas did. And also, to make it simple, besides writing from the oral tradition, was dividing it into 4. It's a long description of how that went about. And then there was the Purana section, or the Smriti section, that's from the one original Veda, the same text from the one original Veda, and he compiled that. So that's how the Bhagavatam first made its manifestation. Then we have another very important meeting. Even after compiling everything, Vyasadeva, his spiritual master, already existing spiritual master, Narada Muni, appeared in this remote place and asked Vyas, "Why are you looking despondent?" He said, "I don't know, but I think you know." So Narada gave some understanding to Vyas why it was so. He compiled the Vedas in its 4 divisions in a proper way. There was nothing wrong with his composition, other than in the composition itself, he gave inordinate emphasis to fruitive activities, or the karma kanda section of the Vedas is very vast. 90-something% of the whole Vedas is that. And you haven't given sufficient emphasis and illumination of the purpose of all of that, besides saying people already have tendency for fruitive activities. Now you've kind of authorized it. Yeah, it's good. Do fruitive activities. But that's not the means to reach the goal, nor is it the goal. Fulfill material desires in a theistic way. The goal is Krishna, and so he gave him instruction what to do. And his instruction was very simple, 2 things. Fix your mind in intense concentration, in samadhi, and whatever it is that you realize, that should be the subject of your writing. Just focus on Krishna. And after giving him this instruction, Narada went on further to describe how he became Narada, like his previous life. And essentially, he started from an obscure nobody. And there's who he was before that, also explained elsewhere. In the previous day of Brahma, before my present birth as Narada, I was born as the son of a maidservant, engaged in the service of Brahmanas who are following the Vedic principles. That's Narada in his previous life, and that's his mother, and that's the sages. When they were living together during the 4 months of the rainy season, I was engaged in their personal service. Service to the sages. And in addition to service, he would hear their discussions. Hearing transcendental teachings in a mood of service. And they would sometimes have remnants. So only once, by their permission, I took the remnants of their food, and by so doing, all my sins were at once eradicated. Now that's pretty good. If you can just take prasadam once and all your sins are eradicated, and you feel it, like, wow, let's have some more. Thus, being engaged, I became purified in heart. Now, he was elevated, obviously, before that happened, and he was already in a good mood of service. Specifically, it says he wasn't like the other boys, frivolous and running to play and silly. He was very clear in his head and very clear and focused on being with the sadhus and serving them nicely and hearing from them. So he got their prasadam. And at that time, the very nature of the transcendentalists became attractive to me. And vice versa. They were attracted by the nature and the quality of this little boy. So they showed special mercy to him. You know, wise men seeing this very gentle little boy that liked to hear. So they showed special affection to him. Natural. By the mercy of those great Vedantists, my taste for hearing of attractive activities of Krishna increased at every step. So he's now in a progressing very quickly. And as my taste developed, I could realize that it was only in my ignorance that I had accepted gross and subtle governings, for both Krishna and I are transcendental. So he's getting some realizations, and along with the attraction for the topics. By that most confidential knowledge, I could understand clearly the influence of the energy of Krishna's form as Paramatma upon everything. By knowing that, one can be fully conscious of him and personally meet him. So that happened. He personally met Super Soul. So the 4 months of the rainy season concluded, that the great sages left. Once upon a time, my poor mother, when going to fetch water from the well, was bitten on the leg by a serpent influenced by supreme time. So she instantly died. I took this as a special mercy, the special mercy of the Lord, who always desires benediction for his devotees, and so thinking, I started for the north. Now that's not a normal reaction for a little boy. We don't hear anything about his father. We hear about his mother, and he's a little boy and his mother dies of a snake bite. He's all alone. That could be pretty traumatic. But Narada in his previous life somehow was of such elevated consciousness, somehow, without knowing, special mercy of the Lord. He has teachings. He has practices. They gave him some mantra for chanting. They gave him a process of meditation. They gave lots and lots of mercy. So he's in this really good space, consciousness-wise, for letting go of the temporary and taking shelter of the eternal. So then he became a little mendicant. I passed through many flourishing metropolises, towns and villages, and also dark and dangerous, fearful forests, which were the play yards of snakes, owls, and jackals, and very difficult to go through alone. Little boy. After that, under the shadow of a banyan tree in an uninhabited forest, I began to meditate upon the Paramatma, situated within, as I learned from those liberated souls. And as soon as I began to meditate upon that form with my mind, transformed in transcendental love, tears rolled down my eyes, and without delay Krishna appeared on the lotus of my heart. So he was eager, Super Soul reciprocated. He was eager and qualified, and Super Soul reciprocated. Being exceedingly overpowered by feelings of happiness, every part of my body became separately enlivened. I became absorbed in an ocean of ecstasy. And then something happened. Poof, Super Soul disappeared. And then he heard a voice, Super Soul's voice, saying, normally I'm not visible unless one is completely pure, but because I wanted to encourage you, I made myself visible, but you won't see me again for the rest of your life. But continue, and you'll reach the goal. And so he did. In due course of time, I, who was fully absorbed in thinking of Krishna, and who therefore had no attachments, being completely freed from all material taints, met with death as lightning and illumination occur simultaneously. So that's his old body leaning against that wall over there, and that's the Narada body that came out of the old body. I quit the body made of 5 material elements and was awarded a transcendental body befitting an associate of Krishna. So his body of Narada Muni that we know of was from a previous day of Brahma that came out a spiritual form from the material form, or the soul with a fully developed spiritual form. But it was the end of the day of Brahma, so a whole night of Brahma passed, lasting, it's a long number, 4,300,000,000 solar years, after which the next day of Brahma began. At that time I appeared, along with other great rishis. We know that Narada, along with the Sapta rishis, were manifest from the body of Brahma. He's the direct born son of Brahma. And he had the same Narada Muni form, because it was a spiritual form. And remembered everything because he didn't have a material body. We forget because we have material bodies. We identify with them and then things change and we forget. Since then, I travel everywhere without restriction, both in the transcendental world and in the 3 divisions of the material world. Being fixed in unbroken devotional service, I constantly travel, singing mantras, vibrating this instrument called a veena, which is charged with transcendental sound and which is given to me by Krishna himself. Imagine being given a musical instrument as a gift from Krishna himself. You'd probably be very attached to it. We always see Narada with his veena. And so Vyas did what Narada said to do. He sat in trance, he had a vision. Here's the vision, an image of the vision, and then he began compiling according to his vision. And this vision included understanding that this Bhagavata, this narration of the topics of Krishna, this is the refuge for victims of the age of Kali. That was what he wanted. When he started compiling all the Vedas in a written form, that was the purpose. People in the age of Kali are forgetful, they're not going to understand things so easily, so make it easy. And that was his meditation for the benefit of us. You know, the sojourners in this material world during this age of Kali, specifically. Following that, that's how the Bhagavatam appeared. And that ends in the beginning of chapter 7. And immediately following that, the sages go, wow, the topics of Bhagavata or Bhagavan are the means of perfection. Can you say some Bhagavad Katha? And Sutta says, sure. And he starts narrating Srimad Bhagavatam, and the emphasis is Krishna's relationship with his devotees. Krishna first appears as the chariot driver of Arjuna, protecting the Pandavas and Parikshit from the Brahmastras of Ashvatthama. Chapter 7. Chapter 8, Queen Kunti's prayers, who wanted Krishna to stay in Hastinapur. Krishna didn't consent, but when Yudhishthira appealed, he consented. He stayed for some time, and then he left Hastinapur heading for Dwarka. But he didn't get there yet before chapter 9, because in chapter 9 is the passing of grandfather Bhishma, and instructions to Yudhishthira, as we see in the red cloth in the front. Krishna was there. Of course, the other Pandava brothers were also there, and a host of great sages, because it's a very significant event, the passing of grandfather Bhishma. And Krishna's kindness was acknowledged by Bhishma. Krishna has kindly come so I can fix my eyes completely upon the form and face of the Supreme Lord as I leave my body. So he remained a few more months in Hastinapur, and finally he left Hastinapur heading for Dwarka. And the great separation from Hastinapur when Krishna leaves, but great jubilation in Dwarka when Krishna returns. This is all narrated in the first canto. And it's like very, very beautiful description. The ladies up on the rooftops out of shyness, and Krishna glances at them, and by his glancing at them, Krishna enters their eyes, then enters their hearts, and they feel that they're embracing Krishna. In this way, they're fully satisfied, although they're up on the rooftops. It's a loving exchange appropriate for their position. And then all the other exchanges of different, according to the different relationships with the residents of Dwarka. And they're very happy. Then comes a section where Parikshit's birth and his early activities are described, because we're getting towards, working towards the curse of Maharaj Parikshit and all of that comes towards the end of this canto. So before the birth of Maharaj Parikshit, astrologers were consulted, at the time of his birth. What's his life going to be like? Is he going to be a fit person to rule the world? And the whole long section of what the astrologers had to say, what his powerful glories were. And so his ruling goes on for some time. Well, his growing up goes on for some time. We then hear in chapter 13 about Vidura's pilgrimage, because they go way back. No. In chapter 13, this is now before Parikshit's been born. The Kurukshetra battle has not yet taken place. Vidura, at the beginning of the chapter, Vidura tries to dissuade Duryodhana from the battle. Duryodhana insults him. He goes on pilgrimage to purify himself from that unwholesome association. In the course of that pilgrimage, he traveled, and then he came back. When he traveled, he met Uddhava and Maitreya, which comes later, third canto, fourth canto. So, back to Vidura. Vidura then returns. He's on our left. The blind Dhritarashtra is on our right. And after achieving spiritual perfection, hearing Krishna's teachings directly, Vidura returns, a topmost devotee, and there's another receiving. He's received like a sadhu, not just like a family member, because they recognize his elevated. He was gone for 34 years. Didn't just go for a hop, skip, and a jump to holy places in India. He was absorbed and hearing from holy people as he traveled. So he came back a Uttama devotee, topmost devotee. And there's how they receive him, how he gives to them, but his focus is to relieve his elder brother Dhritarashtra from his terrible plight. And he's really heavy with him, and he succeeds in persuading Dhritarashtra to leave home. Go to the forest. Your days are numbered. Better to fix your mind in a detached manner. And the power of Vidura's spiritual attainment now was able to change Dhritarashtra's heart. Dhritarashtra went to the forest. We hear this in chapter 13. In a mystic trance, his body just burst into flames. Gandhari entered into the fire, and that was the end of Dhritarashtra and the end of chapter 13. Meanwhile, back in Hastinapur, Yudhisthira feels badly what happened with Dhritarashtra, so forth and so on. He often takes responsibility for what looks like ill fortune. And then they're waiting for Arjuna to come back because he was sent by Yudhisthira. They had this intuition, Krishna is going to leave. But they didn't want to say it. So Arjuna, find out what's Krishna's plan. Arjuna didn't come back. Yudhisthira saw many ill omens. Finally, Yudhisthira came back. Arjuna came back and cried and cried. The great warrior cried and cried, saying Krishna left. Now, it's a detail, but listen to the detail. When Krishna left, just before he left, Daruka, his chariot driver, was there. And we heard this yesterday evening, by the way. And Krishna said to his chariot driver, Daruka, go to Dwarka, inform the queens, because the Yadu dynasty, many of the men in the Yadu dynasty were gone. They self-annihilated in fratricidal war. But the queens were remaining. And he said, tell them in 7 days, Dwarka is going to enter into the sea. So they should leave. And arrange for Arjuna to take the queens back under the care of Maharshi Parikshit. So they went to the care of Maharshi Parikshit. Maharshi Parikshit sent them to be with the great-grandson of Krishna, Vajranabh, who was put in charge of Mathura. We heard about this last night. During that journey back to Hastinapur, where he's now reporting that's the next slide, reporting to Yudhisthira that Krishna had left. It doesn't say in Canto 1, it says elsewhere, he came with the queens from Dwarka. And because he said to Yudhisthira that in the course of my travels, I was trying to protect the queens from some cowherd men. I, this grady, mighty armed warrior that was defeating Maharathis left and right and so forth during the Kurukshetra battle, now I'm defeated by cowherd men. Which tells me that the strength that I had in Kurukshetra battle was all Krishna, and when the battle is over, then the strength is removed. Or I'm the strength of the strong. So it's all part of this seamless journey from Dwarka back to Hastinapur. When Maharaj Yudhisthira understands what happened, he doesn't want to stay. So he turns the kingdom over to Maharaj Parikshit, who we heard a little bit about already. And the departure, according to the Bhagavatam, it's quite different than what we hear in Mahabharata. What we hear in Mahabharata is the Pandavas had to see hell. Now there's some detail in commentary that says they went to heaven, and there's, by Indra's powers, they were seeing an apparition or a mystical experience of hell for whatever wrongs they may have done before they entered into heaven, and then when they went onwards. That's what commentary says. But the Bhagavatam doesn't say that at all. The Bhagavatam says they went straight to Krishna in their self-same bodies. Something similar to what happened to Dhruva. He didn't Narada changed his body. Dhruva didn't. His body became fully spiritualized. The Pandavas, their body became fully spiritualized in their self-same bodies. They rejoined Krishna. This is just a summary. And there's one other significant meeting. That's the meeting between Parikshit and Shukadev. Now, Parikshit was the posthumous son of Abhimanyu. That is, his Abhimanyu's wife, Uttara, was pregnant before the Kurukshetra battle occurred, and Abhimanyu was killed during the Kurukshetra battle. So when Parikshit was still in the womb of his mother, Ashvatthama tried to kill him. Krishna appeared, as this painting shows, to protect him. Parikshit was saved. Parikshit was born. He became a great king and a powerful ruler. This is one painting showing in those little circles there, the vices of Kali in Kali Yuga, because Kali Yuga, the commencement of Kali Yuga, starts shortly after Krishna departs, almost immediately after Krishna departs. And so Krishna has departed. So Kali Yuga is happening. Not in full swing yet, but the personality of Kali is doing bad stuff. We see these sinful activities down at the bottom. That's what Kali inspires. And the painting shown here marks it very clearly. The personality of Kali, who's in that red robe or cape, has been in the business of breaking the legs of a bull. That's the bloody legs of the bull and the club that he was clubbing him with. And Maharaj Parikshit has got his sword drawn, ready to chop him. So there's this whole discussion between the two, and the symptoms of the age of Kali happen from this point on. Maharaj Parikshit could have killed him, would have saved a lot of trouble, but he also understood this is Krishna's plan. It is the age of Kali, and I can't interfere with Krishna's plan. So he didn't kill him. Later, this virtuous, powerful King Parikshit did something in chapter 18 that's very inappropriate. He was hunting in the forest, came to the hermitage of a sage, Shamak Rishi. Shamak Rishi was absorbed in meditation, didn't respond to the king's words, so the king became angry, took his sword, lifted a dead snake on the tip of his sword and placed a dead snake like a garland on the neck of Shamak Rishi. And when his son came back and saw the dead snake and he heard what happened, he cursed the king to die by the bite of a snake bird. So that's all leading up to the king renouncing his kingdom, turning his kingdom over to his son. What was his son's name? Starts with a J. Janamejaya. 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 Shringi was the son of Shamak Rishi, but Janamejaya was the next king, son of Maharaj Parikshit. So we went to the bank of the river, and sages came. There you see there's Narada in the audience. Narada is the spiritual master of Vyasa. Vyasa is in the audience. And there on that seat is Shukadev speaking to Maharaj Parikshit, the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. We're almost done. This is another very important meeting, right? The meeting between Shukadev and Maharaj Parikshit. And, the respect that was offered and the questions that were presented, etc. We hear a little background of Shukadev's history. He was the son of Vyasadeva, and by his detachment from the world, and even concerned about being influenced by Maya, he has stayed within the womb of his mother for too long, 16 years. And so Vyasadeva went all the way to Dwaraka to request Krishna to come all the way back and give a promise to the child in the womb of his good wife that he won't fall into Maya if he comes out. So he came out. And as soon as he came out, he went walking away from the ashram of Vyas. And there you see Vyas calling for his son. We see in the front that the ladies are not being disturbed by a naked little boy or a 16-year-old boy, but they are covering themselves when Vyas comes, because he's a grahastha. He's making a distinction between this type and that type of body. But Shukadev Goswami was beyond those considerations. Then it's not right in the first canto, but elsewhere, it's described that a trick was made to bring Shukadev back from the forest. He thoroughly instructed his son, Shukadev, in the whole message of the Bhagavatam. Then he went again traveling and became the speaker of the Bhagavatam to Maharaj Parikshit. And this is the last slide, almost. The two main questions, so on our right, that's the king in a loincloth, and our left, that's Shukadev, and many sages in the assembly. So Maharaj Parikshit asked these two questions. You're the spiritual master of great saints and devotees. I am therefore begging you to show the way of perfection for all persons, especially for one who is about to die. So what's the duty of a person who's about to die? The second, please let me know what a man should hear, chant, remember, and worship. Shrotavya, kirtitavyascha, dhyeya, pujas chanichada. These four things. And what he should do and not do. Please explain all this to me. So that's the launching pad for the whole rest of the Bhagavatam. And so the emphasis on this section, because there's many points, many points. I mean, Kunti's prayers and Bhishma's instructions, and there's so many nice things. The instructions of Vidura to Dhritarashtra. There's so many nice exchanges. But the meeting of a sadhu, identifying a sadhu, how to properly receive, the kinds of inquiries that one might ask, and the eagerness to receive that the transcendental response from such a speaker is a very important element in getting from Srimad Bhagavatam what it's meant to give. The mood of the heart in receiving its message. Okay, so that's Canto 1, Momentous Meetings. And here's a very old painting kind of giving a summary of Canto 1. Many different things are in that painting. So we're ready for tomorrow evening. Stay tuned. Canto 2, Essential Questions and Eloquent Answers. Okay, it's 20 after the hour. Let's see if there's some discussion. Here's the microphone right there. Anybody would like to discuss something? You got to stay in the room.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
So, First thing, because we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam, it's been like 6 months now.
6 months.
Yeah, more than 6 months.
How
I think
far have you
September,
gotten?
that's when we started as a group. September last year.
How far have you gotten?
We are in Canto 2, Chapter 3.
Canto 2, Chapter 3.
Yes. So,
It's a lot there, huh?
yeah, it is too much, and you're covering wonderfully. I mean, it's a very good refreshment for us, especially yesterday's and today's class. So, as a parent of 2 kids and reading Bhagavatam or hearing Bhagavatam every day, what should be our consciousness when we are hearing or reading Bhagavatam? Part 2 is when we hear or read, I mean, how can we, what is the science for applying the Srimad Bhagavatam in our daily activities?
You're asking several things. Applying,
Applying,
and what should be our mood when we're hearing, reading.
yes.
There's 2 things. There
Two
was
things,
another
yes.
one in there somewhere. I forget now.
Yeah, the first part is the mood, and the second part is
Application.
application.
Well, there are many suggestions. One of them is you're associating with Krishna. Like you have an altar, or so it's something that's absolute and sacred. Therefore, we respect the Bhagavatam. You know how in the Sikhs they have their way of respecting their scripture and etc., without detailing. So with respect to the scripture, because it's Krishna, it's manifestation of Krishna when he leaves this world. It's how Krishna makes himself available in this Kali Yuga. That's one of the 6 questions, 6 answers, right? The very last answer in the end of chapter 3. It's Krishna's personal presence. So it's similar to when chanting the holy name. It's not just a sound, it's the person. So I'm suggesting that's an appropriate mood, because then you're looking up and the heart is open and you're being careful, to be on the one hand attentive and the other hand, taking it as if it's some ordinary literature. It's not that to say that you are or anyone else is, but it's just, it checks that tendency and makes the heart open to receive and restore relationship with Krishna through that sound, through the message of the Bhagavatam. I would say another, it's related, but another is, even if you don't understand something, that's okay. Recognize there's purification going on, even if I don't understand. That's, the high regard for the book, because it's not different than Krishna. And I may not understand Krishna right away, but I know that it's purifying, that I've somehow this very merciful manifestation, although I'm not qualified. So, those are, that I would say, in addition, just regularly. Because consciousness goes up and down, but the Bhagavatam doesn't. The Bhagavatam is purifying, so consciousness will gradually start to go up. Even with there's, the what's the mathematical term? Huh? No, that's not the term. The angle at which the axis, the X and the Y, anyway, it starts to go up. So yes, okay. You get the idea. Consciousness starts to move. So you can look forward to it and you can experience it, although there's up and down. You can look forward to it And it's, its relationship with Krishna. You tune in to the Krishna relationship channel in your consciousness on a regular basis. Uh-oh. That was China. Okay. And then the application part, it's essential. So that it's just a very simple rule. That which you have understood, let me apply it. Because that way I'll get the full benefit. If I just learn something but don't apply it, I'm not going to get the full benefit, and likely it'll depart.
I have another question. So when the Kali appeared, the next part that we understood, but even before that, like what happened in that assembly of, Duryodhana and Draupadi and all those scenes, isn't that Kali symptoms or is that something else?
Well, it's not Kali symptoms. What Duryodhana doing Duryodhana's thing, insulting, etc., etc. No, it's just his demoniac behavior. There were demoniac people before Kali Yuga began, and it's still, Dwarka Yuga is rolling along. Dwarpa Yuga is rolling. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. My question is, many times I have heard that we need to listen, we need to hear Srimad Bhagavatam with rapt attention. I'm trying to understand what is rapt attention. Is it something like we need to understand the application part of it, or just to take?
No,
it
it's
as
the
it
hearing
is?
part. Because the application, when you've heard, you're going to do something. The house is on fire. Okay. What for lunch? When you've heard, you do something. The application follows hearing. So rapt attention means a mind that's not distracted while hearing. You follow?
Yeah.
And same with japa, same with the Bhagavatam.
So sometimes I hear while going in the train or while walking.
That's okay.
Is that okay?
Yes, more than okay. Very good.
It mainly depends on our consciousness.
Yes. It's purifying if you're not in rapt attention, and if you're rapt attention, it's more purifying. I mean, supposing you have some recording going on while you're asleep, it's really soft. Or supposing somebody's in a coma, play kirtan and recordings anyways.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Okay. Anything over here? No? Okay.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. As we were hearing about the meetings, one thing which was really striking is their eagerness as they were meeting this.
One thing is what?
Eagerness.
Eagerness.
As we read Srimad Bhagavatam or associating with devotees, I'm finding that eagerness and enthusiasm, Guru Maharaj, which is actually nice. But sometimes it feels, because of that association and because of kind of a shadow from the persons whom I'm associating with, the level seems to be more than what my actual level of eagerness or enthusiasm. I'm definitely able to chant and hear better when I'm in that space, but I just don't want to be in some, I'm trying to formulate, don't want to be in an artificial or higher level than what I am. How do I be true to myself in that level of eagerness, enthusiasm?
You know, it sounds to me like either one of two things. Take it out of, in a different context. I may have not understood your question, but I don't want to dance unless I'm feeling ecstasy. When I'm feeling ecstasy, then I feel it's appropriate. I can dance. And Prabhupada say, well, dance and you'll feel ecstasy. Raise your arms and dance and you'll feel ecstasy. And it's true. You know, beyond your level, you'll feel something. Just a little anecdotal story. My first visit to the Boston Temple when I was still an undergraduate student in college, and I was visiting Boston to look at different schools I might want to go to for graduate school. That was the purpose of driving from my school to Boston. And we went to the temple in the evening, and they had this really ecstatic kirtan, and they were like, here's a detail. Brahmananda was visiting. He had just been with Prabhupada for some couple of months or something, and it was like, you know, a celebration. And the devotees were bouncing off the wall and jumping and, you know, leaping around. And I was, you know, a wallflower looking at, like, you know, wow, they're really having a good time. And the temple president saw me, you know, not cringing, but kind of like shy. And he came over and smiled and reached out his hand and took me by the hand and pulled me into the dance. You know, I didn't, you know, smack him or something. I didn't resent what he was doing. And I wasn't feeling anything. It was beyond my realization, for sure. But, you know, I started dancing and it was ecstatic. I didn't feel the same level and maturity and purity as everybody else was, but it was a very happy experience. Spiritually joyful, not just playful. Oh, don't worry. If you're feeling, you know, something beyond your normal level of consciousness, that's mercy. It comes from the association of merciful devotees. Don't overly analyze these things. Okay. We're going online, right? Okay. Pretty ecstatic. It's going to be a good question, I can tell.
Prabhu has 4 questions from yesterday's class. The 6 questions, 6 answers. The first question is, the 6 questions by the sages seem disconnected in the sense they are on different, seemingly unrelated topics. Is it because they were asked by different sages, or is my understanding wrong about the apparent disconnect?
They're not disconnected. They're just they are essential topics that someone that wants to know about Krishna would ask. The connecting point is Krishna. But That's, they're not disconnected. They're not connected. They're in relation to Krishna. They're proper questions. It's summarizing the essence of the whole Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is vast, so they're not necessarily. Wouldn't be so appropriate if they're asking the same thing in different ways.
The second question, I wonder why the sages chose to ask only 6 questions and not more or less.
We have to ask the sages. It's just a simple summary. Don't overanalyze.
And the third question is, the sages could have asked any questions.
Let's go on to the next question.
The last one is there any significance of the order?
No. There may be, but it's just natural questions from inquisitive sages from a qualified speaker. Next.
From Sanchari, you have mentioned that the Bhagavatam is not written chronologically.
Yes.
And that we cannot use the binary processor of the mind to understand it.
Yes.
Yet some questions still arise when hearing about the meetings.
When hearing what?
Hearing about the meetings, the 3 meetings.
Okay.
Vyasadeva wrote the Bhagavatam starting with the sages meeting Suta Goswami, who met Shukadev, who heard from Vyasadeva himself before it all happened.
Yes, that's right.
Vyasadeva is Trikalagya.
Yeah.
Yet, does that mean the Bhagavatam in its written form isn't as full as the one spoken to Shukadev by Vyasadeva?
Well, this is a natural question that people ask, and there are different ways of answering this natural question that people ask. One thing that's important to understand is the Bhagavatam is eternal. It's not that Vyasadeva was doing a creative writing class and this is what he came up with for his PhD or something. It's eternal literature that he was just manifesting. And the fact that there's histories, Puranic histories within it, is not a problem. It's an eternal literature. And in the heavenly realm there's more verses, and in the spiritual realm there's more verses. And it's an eternal sound vibration that he was just making manifest. And so the sequence, and he has that capacity. I mean, when he saw, according to what Vyasadeva, what Narada instructed him, what he saw was apashat purusham purnam mayam cha yad ahaitukam. He saw the whole spirit. He saw the whole Bhagavatam. He saw everything. He not only saw Krishna and Radharani, but he saw the whole spiritual world, and he saw all the pastimes. It's something similar to Valmiki writing Ramayana, and Valmiki is one of the characters in Ramayana. That's also an eternal literature. So, how it was sequenced, because this is one of the things. If he's able to do Trikaligya, then why is this and that and the other thing? It's a composition it has a purpose. The Bhagavatam is to help us fix our consciousness on Bhagavan. And therefore it's not necessarily chronological. One of the distinctions between the Itihasas and the Puranas is the Itihasas are chronological, and the Puranas are not. Doesn't mean this one's transcendental and that one's not transcendental or something. It's just there's this one of the dividing characteristics. So the sequencing and who's in it and how it happens and stitching this together with that, etc., etc. Don't be overly concerned about it. The purpose of Vyas was to inspire his reader, you and me and the rest of us, to bring our attention to Krishna. So his reasons for putting things in the sequence that he put things are for that purpose.
This question is from Amara Mataji. She has two questions. The first one is, why the first two cantos are called Lotus Feet of the Lord?
Why not? Because you begin meditating on the form of the Lord at his feet, and that's the first two cantos. And gosh, if you're at the feet of the Lord, you got the Lord.
The second question is Bhagavad Gita a prerequisite to read Srimad Bhagavatam?
No. Someone can read the Bhagavatam and then Bhagavad Gita. Now, it's a natural sequence. You read Bhagavad Gita, become familiar, and then read the Bhagavatam. But it's not like there's a rule or something like that. When in the 1970, when the Bhagavatam wasn't fully available, but it started becoming available, in Canto 2, as Canto 2 was being published, 1970, we had morning Bhagavatam and evening Bhagavad Gita class. We didn't, it wasn't like we have to read Bhagavad Gita till the beginning and the end before we can read the Bhagavatam.
This question is from Leela Smaran Prabhu. What are some of the qualities that one can cultivate to make one's heart more and more receptive for receiving the sadhu in one's heart?
This is very similar to a question that came up during our topics in Detroit, which Leela Smarna was taking part in. And the question was, how does one develop a simple heart? It was asked differently, but when the heart is simple, then the eagerness and receptivity increase. In complexity, the opposite of simplicity, it's more difficult. Things bounce; they don't go in. So one of the answers in that condition was, or in that discussion was, having gratitude towards those sources from which our spiritual life has begun and has been nourished, both. I mean, starting with Prabhupada, and gratitude towards those who have been, substantial and significant in helping us make our Krishna connection. So, in short, gratitude. Then there's eagerness, because back to your question about application, if I've heard something that my intelligence says, that makes sense to me, then fair chance we'll apply it. I mean, it doesn't have to mean, but when we apply knowledge, something happens. You get a realization, wow. And that increases faith. So the starting point is this position of gratitude towards, say, our founder Acharya, and the gifts that our founder Acharya has given. It's something like a child that received from mother and father. And it's not just receiving from mother and father, but a feeling of gratitude towards mother and father from those gifts that have been received, and the tirelessness with which mother and father serve their dependence. And when there's gratitude, then one can receive better.
This question is from Sri Vallabha Prabhu. Is there any specific commentary on why Shukadev Goswami was chosen amongst the best of the best to deliver the message of the Srimad Bhagavatam?
Well, there's different answers. It's another way of asking that question was, who was Shukadev Goswami before he was Shukadev Goswami? What was the qualification that he had that entitled him to be Shukadev Goswami? Or be, self-realized while still within the womb of his mother? That's pretty extraordinary. He didn't even do anything, and he's self-realized. There's different answers to that. Some Puranas say he's a parent of Radha. That's pretty good qualification. Or the son of Vyas. And just like while still within the womb, Prahlad Maharaj heard from Narada, while still within the womb, Shukadev Goswami was hearing his father, Vyasadeva, who is an incarnation of the personality Godhead. So, whether he was already this special entity, or just by being the son of Vyas and being connected to Vyas and hearing from Vyas and receiving his spiritual potency even before he was born, he was an elevated person. But Pivata Bhagavatam, this third verse, read Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 3, and you'll find, a nice explanation of what's so special about Shukadev.
There are two questions from Shravya Mataji from India. Is the Bhagavatam a person or a personification of sound vibration?
Both.
And the second question is, how different is to have a relationship with the person Bhagavatam when compared to book Bhagavatam?
They're equal. Now, one may have more realization in this direction, and another may have more realization in that direction, but it's like the holy name is Krishna himself. The Bhagavatam is Krishna himself. The deity form is Krishna himself.
And one question from Sanchari. When hearing about the disappearance pastime of the Pandavas, I was reminded of Srila Prabhupada in his final pastimes, and how he had wanted to go around Govardhan, which would have been very detrimental to his health. The disciples who were caring for him had to balance what is practical with the desire to serve the spiritual master completely. This made me think about how these decisions manifest in our own lives, which led to my wondering about what the Vedic perspective is on euthanasia.
I don't know if there's any commentary on the Vedas about euthanasia. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. You have something. Last minute.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. No, I just want to clarify the question. Like,
Which one?
Sukadeva Goswami, when he was in the womb of his mother, so he
Yes.
heard Bhagavatam with his father when he was in the womb of his mother.
Well, we don't know if he heard the Bhagavatam when he was in the womb of his mother. It's not like Narada and Prahlad.
Because when I saw the slide, when Vyasadeva was giving the Bhagavatam to, he was telling Bhagavatam to Sukadeva Goswami. So that's what I just want to clarify, whether he heard 2 times.
I've not heard. It's the same question being asked again, and I have not heard that he was hearing the Bhagavatam from his father while within the womb. Rather, when he left the womb, he had to get Krishna to come and say, "Don't worry, you won't fall into Maya." He wasn't attracted to Ajita until later. And that's when Vyasadeva sent followers to bring him back by reciting verses of the Bhagavatam, which he became attracted to. I mean, I can ask. So there are some scholarly devotees that will probably know more than what I've just said. But it's not my understanding that he heard the Bhagavatam from his father while still in the womb. You know, the artist making a certain depiction may not have captured what really happened. But then, again, I'll ask. There are scholarly devotees that can probably find the answer, one way or the other. Okay? Oh, very good.
Okay. So from Bhagavad Gita, the 18th chapter, I think 66 maybe, but Sarvadharma Parityajya,
Yeah.
that one. So Krishna says that surrender to me.
He does.
Yes. So now if someone come and ask, surrendering to Krishna, after reading Bhagavad Gita, should I go and read Srimad Bhagavatam again? Because it's already been concluded that surrendering to Krishna is the main thing. Now, I was thinking, is it because we need to hear Bhagavatam so we can hear more about Krishna, glorifying Krishna, about how he was glorified, and
Etc.
we'll
Yes.
be more happy.
Yes.
That is the purpose.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, you can go on to graduate school after undergraduate school. Okay. Prabhupada ki